Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining me today. So this education section is all about the pelvic floor. It's something that we don't really discuss because for some of us it can be quite an embarrassing subject. And it shouldn't be because we've all got one. Yes boys, even you, so you don't get out of this. So over the next 5 minutes, I'm going to have a little chat with you about where the pelvic floor is, what its function is, and how we can improve the function of the pelvic floor and maybe why we would want to. So first of all, where is it? I've got a visual for you. Yeah. If you can imagine that this is your torso. So right at the top, we've got our diaphragm, which is a muscle that helps you to breathe. It sits underneath your lungs. Round the middle, round your core muscles, we've got our transverse abdominal, which is like a corset. Up the front, we've got our six-pack muscles, like our rectus abdominal. Round the waist, we've got our obliques. And then up the back, we've got our spine extensors. At the bottom is like a stopper, it's the pelvic floor. As it gets weak, that's a little bit embarrassing, isn't it? And despite what the tenor lady would like you to believe, you know those adverts, we want to be able to strengthen our pelvic floor so that we can keep control of what's going on down there. So what is the function of the pelvic floor? Not only does it sit with the core muscles to help keep your spine and hips stable, it also helps to keep you continent. So it stops the flow of urine and it also stops the back end as well. And it also has a big effect on your sex life. Now I've got your attention, right? The stronger our pelvic floor muscles are, the better the sex. Simple as that. Okay, so now that I've got your attention, who does it affect and why? So we've got overall factors that affect men and women, but there's a few factors that just affect women. So let's talk about those first. Number one, pregnancy. Okay, so that added excess weight throughout the 9 months as baby grows, that weight pushes down on the pelvic floor and it can weaken it over that time. Number two is childbirth. So I've put them separate because even if you've had a section, you could still have had your pelvic floor muscles weakened through the extra weight of the baby. Number two, boys, cover your ears. Childbirth, obviously, as the baby's coming out, it rips everything on the way down. So we need to put a bit of work in after baby's born. Number three, boys, you can take your hands off now. Number three is the menopause. So ladies, once we reach a certain age, our body stops producing specific hormones. And those hormones are the ones that help to keep the function down there really strong. So it's something to be aware of if you're coming up to that age, or maybe even if you're past it, that you need to work on strengthening up those muscles. So those three are just for women. But as I said, there's overall factors. So number one that affects both men and women is age. It's simply a muscle. If we don't work the muscles, they get weak over time. It's the same with our legs, with our arms, anything else. If we don't use it, we lose it. So age is a factor. Number two is excess weight. So whether we're overweight or obese, any added weight is going to put pressure down onto the pelvic floor. Number three, so things like lifting heavy weights. So again, it's a bit like that excess weight can put pressure onto the pelvic floor, especially if we're not engaging the core muscles correctly. So that doesn't have to be big weights in the gym. We're not talking about the weights that you lift in like your Move Well class, but things like lifting in a manual labour job, or perhaps you were a carer or a nurse, or something that you are lifting something heavy and maybe not focusing on your core muscles. And finally, high impact movements. So things like jumping, running, even walking for long distances, things like that. We really want to be focusing on core muscles. We're not saying not to do those things, but it's important that we keep the function of the pelvic floor. Please at no point think, I cannot strengthen my pelvic floor muscles. So I just want to give you a case study really. Before I came back to mainstream healthy options, I was working out in the community with the physiotherapy department. Now, we see it all over the place. About 90% of our community actually do, of our ageing population, have issues with their pelvic floor. So please do not be afraid to reach out to one of us and talk to us about it, because we're not embarrassed. I had a lady who was afraid to go out for a long walk because she was worried that she would wet herself when she was out walking. So that stopped her leaving her house, it increased her risk of a fall, and I worked with her for 8 weeks. Over the 8 weeks, we managed to get her continent again, just by working on pelvic floor. That is amazing. Now, this lady was almost 80. It's never too late to work your muscles. Now, we know that, and the pelvic floor is a muscle. So, how do we improve the function of the pelvic floor? We work the muscles of the pelvic floor. How do we do it? It's really simple. So I'm going to give you an exercise that you can do standing, seated, or lying down. And then I'm going to give you one more exercise to do lying down. So if you are standing, I'm not going to stand up because I'll lose my head. I just want your big focus to be relaxing your shoulders and your back and your tummy. Think about bringing your hip bones together. So almost like you're closing the curtains. And then thinking about stopping the flow of urine. So we're lifting from the back to the front because the pelvic floor is like a sling. It moves back to front. And then it's like a trampoline. It opens wide. So we're thinking about drawing in hip to hip. So back to front, hip to hip. And holding that engagement. And then releasing. Doing that again. So you might even want to pop your fingers about an inch in from your hip bones and press in. And as you lift up through the pelvic floor and bring your hip bones together, you should feel a small pull in between your hips. Now, if you're quite weak in those areas, maybe for the first few weeks, you won't actually feel like you're doing anything, but you will over time. Okay, so before I come to the floor to show you your lying down exercises, a few things that people have said to me over time, which might help. Ian Malarvey was one of them, because I'm not a boy. I've asked him what he would say. And he said it's like walking into cold, icy water. You should feel your boys lift up. And if you were to do it in front of a mirror, you might see your little man stand to attention as well. So really think about lifting up through the pelvic floor. Okay, if you're sitting on a chair, what I want you to think about is drawing your sit bones together, so the actual bones, drawing them together, and then imagine you're trying to lift off your seat without actually obviously standing up. So we're using the core and the pelvic floor muscles to lift away from the seat. Now, the final thing I'm going to give you to do is a little exercise that you can do either lying on your bed, so you don't actually have to do this one lying on the floor. Please don't come down onto the floor if you're not comfortable, but you can do this one lying on your bed. So hopefully if I lie down you can see me. What I want you to do is place one hand into the low back and one hand just below your belly button. Now the focus is pressing your weight into the hands at the bottom and keeping your belly pulled away from your hands so it's not doming out. So we're pulling everything in. And then really slowly sliding one leg along the floor and sliding that leg back in. Now the slower we go the better, so that we don't shift our weight side to side on that hand on the floor. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that because I've gone well over the 5 minutes that I told you would be. Again, if you've got any questions, if you want more exercises, give me a phone, give me a text, or anything you like, all good. Have a fabulous day and see you soon. Bye.